Elena Santiago clutched her old phone with trembling fingers. The screen cracked and flickering as she typed frantically. The waiting room of Metro City General Hospital was crowded and cold, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across her worried face. At 24, with twins on the way and not a penny to spare, she had never felt more alone or terrified in her life. This desperate message to her boss, explaining her sudden absence from her waitressing shift, was about to change everything, though she couldn't possibly know it yet. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. I'm so sorry I can't make it to work today. I'm at the hospital with early contractions. The twins might be coming 6 weeks early. Please don't fire me. I need this job more than ever now. Elena hit send without double-checking the number, too distracted by the next wave of pain that made her double over in the uncomfortable plastic chair. She didn't realize she had texted a wrong number, one that belonged to Alexander Winters, the 35-year-old CEO of Winters Enterprises, one of the largest tech companies in the country. 3 miles away, in a sleek glass skyscraper that dominated the city skyline, Alexander felt his phone vibrate during a board meeting. He rarely checked personal messages while negotiating million-dollar deals, but something compelled him to glance down. The unknown number and the desperate plea from a stranger about twins and contractions made him pause. He should have ignored it. Wrong numbers happened all the time in a city of 8 million people. But something in the raw desperation of the message struck him. Perhaps it was because exactly 5 years ago to the day, his own wife Rebecca had gone into early labor with their daughter. Rebecca hadn't survived the birth complications, and neither had their baby girl. The memory still haunted him, turning him from a passionate entrepreneur into the cold, ruthless businessman the press now called the Ice King of Silicon Valley. Alexander excused himself from the meeting, surprising his executives who were used to him dominating discussions for hours without breaks. In the hallway, he stared at the message again. The rational part of his brain told him to delete it and move on. This wasn't his problem, but the date on his watch, March 15th, reminded him of everything he had lost. "Where are you?" he typed back, not quite understanding why he was engaging with a stranger's crisis. Elena blinked in confusion when her phone pinged with a response. Her boss, Rita, wasn't the type to ask questions. She was the type to simply fire people. She quickly replied, "Metro City General, maternity ward waiting room. I'm so sorry, but the doctor says the twins are coming tonight. I can make up the shifts next week, I promise." Alexander's jaw tightened as he read the response. Metro City General, the same hospital where he had lost Rebecca and their daughter. He hadn't set foot in that building since that terrible night, avoiding even driving past it on his commute. His assistant, Margaret, appeared at his elbow with documents needing his signature, but he waved her away. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day," he said, his voice clipped and cold as always. Margaret knew better than to question him, especially on this particular date that he always took off each year. Elena waited for a response, growing more anxious by the minute. Her tiny apartment in the rundown part of the city was 3 months behind on rent, and her waitressing job at the Bluebird Diner was all that stood between her and homelessness. The twins' father, her college boyfriend Jason, had disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant. "Not ready for responsibility," he'd said before blocking her number. She had no family to speak of. Her mother had died when she was 12, and her father had retreated into alcoholism shortly after. Elena had put herself through community college, working 2 jobs, almost completing her nursing degree, before the unexpected pregnancy derailed everything. Now, at 9 months pregnant with twins and no support system, losing her job would be catastrophic. Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time. She gasped, clutching the armrests of the chair. An elderly woman sitting nearby noticed her distress and came over. "Honey, where's your family? Is someone coming to be with you?" she asked kindly. Elena shook her head, fighting back tears. "There's no one," the woman frowned with concern. "You need to tell the nurses you're alone. They'll help get you checked in properly." Before Elena could respond, her phone pinged again. The message was brief. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." Elena stared at the screen in confusion. Why would Rita, her perpetually annoyed boss, come to the hospital? It made no sense, but she had no time to wonder as another contraction hit, this one causing her to cry out. The elderly woman called for a nurse, who quickly brought a wheelchair. "Let's get you checked in, sweetheart," the nurse said, helping Elena into the chair. "These babies aren't waiting much longer." As they wheeled her toward the maternity ward, Elena clutched her worn backpack containing everything she owned of value. A photo of her mother, a small stuffed bear for each twin, and exactly $237 in cash that she'd been saving for baby supplies. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was all she had. In the examination room, Dr. Miranda Chen confirmed what Elena feared. The twins were coming tonight, 6 weeks premature. "We'll need to monitor them closely after birth," Dr. Chen explained. "Premature twins often need time in the NICU. Do you have insurance?" Elena bit her lip and shook her head. She had applied for Medicaid when she found out she was pregnant, but the paperwork was still processing. The administrative nightmare had consumed weeks of phone calls and office visits between her shifts at the diner. Dr. Chen's expression softened with sympathy. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's focus on bringing these babies into the world safely. I'll have someone from patient services come talk to you about financial assistance programs." Elena nodded gratefully, but the worry remained. Hospital bills for premature twins could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even with assistance, how would she ever manage? Alexander Winters stepped out of his sleek black Tesla, staring up at the hospital building he had avoided for 5 years. His driver, Thomas, looked concerned. "Sir, are you sure about this? I can go in and find out what's happening with this person if you'd prefer." Alexander shook his head. "No, I'll go." He straightened his immaculate charcoal suit and walked through the automatic doors, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the polished floor. The hospital smell hit him immediately, antiseptic and artificial air, bringing back a flood of memories he'd spent years trying to suppress. At the information desk, he realized he didn't even know the name of the woman who had texted him. "I'm looking for a pregnant woman with twins who just came in." She would have been in the waiting room about 30 minutes ago. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Are you family?" "No," Alexander replied coldly, "but I'm here to help her." "I'm sorry, sir, but without a name or family connection, I can't give you any information." Alexander was about to argue when his phone buzzed again. A new message from the same number. "They're taking me to delivery room 4. The twins are coming now. Please tell Rita I'm so sorry about the shifts." He showed the message to the receptionist. "Delivery room 4. I need to get there." The woman hesitated, then sighed. "4th floor maternity ward, but they won't let you in unless you're family or the father." Alexander took the elevator up, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He had no idea why he was doing this. He had board members, waiting, acquisition papers to sign, and a company to run. Yet here he was, rushing to the side of a complete stranger because of a misdirected text message that had somehow pierced through the ice he had built around his heart. As the elevator doors opened to the maternity floor, he was assaulted by the sounds of beeping monitors and distant cries of newborns. The nurse at the station looked up as he approached. "I need to see the woman in delivery room 4, he stated, his voice carrying the authority that typically got him whatever he wanted. In the corporate world, the nurse was unimpressed. "Are you the father?" "No, but then I'm afraid you'll need to wait in the family area. Only partners and specified support persons are allowed in the delivery rooms." Alexander ran a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Frustration building. She has no one else. She texted me by mistake, thinking I was her boss. She's alone and about to deliver twins prematurely. The nurse's expression softened slightly. You're here because of a wrong number? Yes, Alexander admitted, feeling ridiculous saying it out loud. Look, 5 years ago today, my wife died in this hospital giving birth to our daughter. Our daughter didn't make it either. I don't know why, but when I got this woman's message, I couldn't ignore it. Not today. The nurse studied him for a long moment. Wait here, she finally said, disappearing down the hallway. Alexander stood rigid by the desk, feeling out of place in his $3,000 suit among the anxious family members in the waiting area. A man bouncing a toddler on his knee gave him a curious look, probably wondering what a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine was doing, pacing the maternity ward floor. Minutes later, Dr. Chen emerged from the hallway. Mr. Winters, Alexander Winters. The doctor's eyes widened slightly in recognition of his name. Mr. Winters, I understand you're here for Elena Santiago? Elena. So that was her name. Yes, he said firmly. Is she all right? And the babies? She's in active labor. The twins are coming early, which presents some challenges. Ms. Santiago mentioned she has no family present, and when I told her someone named Alexander was asking about her, she seemed confused, but said to let you know she has the wrong number and apologizes for the inconvenience. Alexander almost smiled at the absurdity of it all. This woman was in labor with premature twins and still apologizing for a misdirected text. Doctor, I'd like to help. Whatever she needs, medical care, specialists for the twins, financial assistance, I want to provide it. Dr. Chen studied him carefully. That's very generous, Mr. Winters, but may I ask why? Alexander looked past the doctor to the hallway that led to the delivery rooms. Because 5 years ago, no one was there when I needed help in this very hospital. Because some mistakes, like a wrong number, might not be mistakes at all. Elena gripped the sides of the hospital bed, sweat beading on her forehead as another contraction seized her body. The delivery room's harsh lighting reflected off the medical equipment surrounding her, monitors beeping steadily in the background. Dr. Chen stood at the foot of the bed, her calm voice guiding Elena through each painful wave. You're doing great, Elena. The first twin is almost ready to make an appearance, Dr. Chen encouraged, her experienced eyes never leaving her patient. On the next contraction, I need you to push with everything you've got. Elena nodded weakly, exhaustion already setting in, though the hardest part was yet to come. She had been in labor for 3 hours now, her body fighting to bring 2 new lives into the world, despite being woefully unprepared for their early arrival. I can't do this alone, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The nurse beside her squeezed her hand sympathetically. You're not alone right now, the nurse reminded her. We're all here with you, and apparently there's a very concerned man in an expensive suit pacing the waiting room who came because of a text message. Elena winced, partly from pain and partly from embarrassment. I still don't understand who he is. I thought I was texting my boss, Rita. The conversation halted as another contraction began. Elena cried out, bearing down with all her strength, as Dr. Chen coached her through it. The room filled with tension and focused energy until a new sound pierced the air. The thin, angry cry of a newborn taking their first breath. It's a boy, Dr. Chen announced, quickly passing the tiny infant to a waiting neonatal team. Elena caught only a glimpse of her son, impossibly small with a shock of dark hair, before he was whisked to a warming station where specialists immediately began checking his vitals. Is he okay? Elena gasped, panic rising in her chest as she watched the medical team working on her baby. He's breathing on his own, which is excellent for 34 weeks, Dr. Chen reassured her. Now, let's get his sibling out to join him. You're doing beautifully, Elena." Before Elena could ask more questions about her son, the next contraction began. The second delivery went faster, and within minutes, another cry joined the first. "And here's your daughter," Dr. Chen announced, her voice warm with joy despite the clinical setting. 2 babies, her children. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as the reality of motherhood crashed over her. She was now responsible for 2 tiny lives when she could barely support herself. The thought was terrifying, exhilarating, and completely overwhelming. The medical team worked efficiently, checking both babies while Elena delivered the placentas. She caught fragments of medical terminology being exchanged: APGAR scores, mild respiratory distress, NICU observation, that increased her anxiety. "They'll need to spend some time in the neonatal intensive care unit," Dr. Chen explained, gently once things had calmed down. "This is very common with premature twins. Your son is 4 pounds 3 ounces and your daughter is 3 pounds 15 ounces. They're actually good weights for twins at 34 weeks, but we need to monitor them closely for the next few days." Elena nodded, trying to absorb everything through her exhaustion. "When can I see them properly?" "We'll take you to the NICU as soon as you're stabilized," the nurse promised. "Have you thought of names?" Names. In all her preparation, buying second-hand onesies and reading parenting books borrowed from the library, names had somehow remained abstract. Elena had lists on her phone, combinations she'd considered, but hadn't committed to anything. "Matteo," she said softly, thinking of her grandfather who had always been kind to her before his death. "Matteo for my son. And—" She hesitated, then remembered the book of poetry her mother used to read to her as a child, "Lily for my daughter." As the medical team prepared to move her to recovery, Dr. Chen approached with an unusual expression, a mixture of confusion and intrigue. "Elena, there's someone here who would like to speak with you when you're ready. He says his name is Alexander Winters. He's the one who came because of your text. Do you know who he is?" Elena frowned, trying to place the name. Winters. Like Winters Enterprises, that tech company with the advertisements everywhere? Dr. Chen nodded. "The very same. He's the CEO. Elena's eyes widened in shock. "I texted the CEO of Winters Enterprises by mistake? Oh my God." She covered her face with her hands, mortification washing over her. "Why would he even come here? Doesn't he have billion-dollar meetings to attend or something? Normally, I wouldn't allow a non-family member to visit so soon, but he's been quite insistent about helping you and the twins. He's also—" Dr. Chen hesitated, "made some arrangements with the hospital administration regarding your stay." Elena's embarrassment quickly transformed into concern. "What kind of arrangements? I can't accept charity from a stranger, especially not some rich CEO, who probably thinks this is his good deed for the year." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "Elena, premature twins in the NICU can mean significant medical expenses. Mr. Winters has expressed his wish to cover these costs. As your doctor, I'd advise you to at least hear what he has to say." Elena fell silent, conflict evident on her face. Pride told her to refuse any handouts, but reality reminded her that her baby's health came before her ego. After a moment, she nodded reluctantly. "I'll talk to him, but not until I've seen my babies properly." 2 hours later, Elena sat in a wheelchair beside the NICU incubators that housed Matteo and Lily. Both infants were attached to monitors, tiny oxygen tubes helping their immature lungs. They seemed so fragile, yet the nurses assured her they were doing remarkably well for their gestational age. She'd been allowed to touch them through the portals in the incubators, marveling at fingers so small they could barely wrap around her pinky. "They're fighters," the NICU nurse told her with a smile. "Just like their mother." Elena was watching Mateo's chest rise and fall when she sensed someone enter the room. She turned to find a tall man in a charcoal suit standing in the doorway. Even if she hadn't known who he was, everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his perfectly tailored clothing to his confident posture. Yet there was something unexpected in his expression as he looked at the twins, a flash of deep sadness quickly masked by a professional demeanor. "Miss Santiago," he said, his voice lower and gentler than she had imagined. "I'm Alexander Winters." Elena straightened in her wheelchair, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Mr. Winters, I'm so sorry about the text. I must have dialed your number by mistake." Alexander stepped into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. "There's no need to apologize. Some might call it a fortuitous error." His eyes moved to the incubators. "Your children are beautiful." "Thank you," Elena replied, unsure how to navigate this bizarre situation. "Dr. Chen mentioned you spoke with the hospital administration about my bills." Alexander nodded, his expression neutral. "I've arranged to cover the medical expenses for you and your twins, the NICU care, your delivery, any specialists they might need during their stay. It's all taken care of." Elena felt her defenses rise. "Why? You don't know me at all." For a moment, Alexander's composed facade faltered. He glanced at the twins again, then back at Elena. "5 years ago today, my wife Rebecca went into premature labor with our daughter in this very hospital. There were complications. Neither of them survived." He spoke the words with practiced control, but Elena could hear the pain beneath the surface. "When I received your text on this specific date, mentioning premature twins, it felt like more than coincidence." Elena's resistance softened slightly. "I'm so sorry about your wife and daughter. That's truly tragic. But Mr. Winters, I can't accept such an enormous gift from a stranger." "Then don't consider it a gift," he replied pragmatically. "Consider it an investment." "An investment in what?" Alexander gestured toward her chart hanging at the foot of her bed. "Dr. Chen mentioned you were studying nursing before your pregnancy. Is that correct?" Elena nodded, surprised he had learned this detail. "I had to drop out with only 1 semester left. I couldn't manage the clinical rotations with the pregnancy." "Winters Medical Technologies is the healthcare division of my company," Alexander explained. "We develop advanced medical equipment, particularly for neonatal care. We're always looking for individuals with both medical training and personal experience with our target demographics." Elena's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Are you offering me a job?" "Eventually, yes, once you've completed your nursing degree. In the meantime, I'm proposing a contract. I'll cover all medical expenses for you and your twins, plus a stipend for living expenses while you finish your education. In return, you'll provide consultation on our neonatal product development once you're recovered, and commit to 2 years working with our company after graduation." Elena studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. "That sounds too good to be true. What's the catch?" Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "The catch, Ms. Santiago, is that I don't make this offer lightly. I expect excellence and dedication. This isn't charity. It's a business arrangement that benefits us both." Before Elena could respond, Lily began to fuss in her incubator, her tiny face scrunching up with displeasure. The NICU nurse quickly approached to check on her. "Her oxygen levels are perfect," the nurse assured Elena. "She's just letting us know she has a strong personality." Alexander watched the tiny infant with an intensity that seemed out of place for a business transaction. Elena noticed his hands were clenched at his sides, as though he was physically restraining himself from reaching toward the incubator. "Mr. Winters," Elena said carefully, "I appreciate your offer, but I need time to think about it." This is all happening very fast, and I just gave birth to twins less than 3 hours ago. Alexander nodded, composing himself. Of course, take the time you need. The medical expenses are covered regardless of your decision about the employment contract. He reached into his suit jacket and produced a business card, placing it on the table beside her. Call this number when you're ready to discuss the details further. It's my private line. As he turned to leave, Elena called after him. Mr. Winters, thank you for coming when a stranger texted you by mistake. Most people would have ignored it. Alexander paused in the doorway, his profile silhouetted against the bright hospital corridor. 5 years ago, I would have ignored it too. Without further explanation, he walked away, leaving Elena alone with her newborn twins and an offer that could change everything. 4 days had passed since the twins' birth, and the NICU had become Elena's second home. She slept in the hospital's parent accommodation room when she could, but spent most hours seated between Matteo and Lily's incubators, alternating between reading medical updates on premature infant care on her phone and simply watching her children breathe. Both twins were improving steadily. Matteo had already been weaned off supplemental oxygen, while Lily was expected to follow suit within days. The nurses had been teaching Elena how to care for her premature babies, everything from special feeding techniques to the careful monitoring they would need after discharge. Each lesson reinforced what she already knew. She was woefully unprepared for the reality of caring for one newborn, let alone 2 premature infants with special needs. Kangaroo care time, announced Nurse Jasmine, approaching with a smile. Who would you like to hold first today? Elena's face brightened. These skin-to-skin sessions had quickly become the highlight of her days. Lily, please. Matteo got extra time yesterday. With practiced efficiency, Jasmine helped transfer the tiny baby girl from her incubator to Elena's chest, making sure the monitoring wires remained untangled. Elena closed her eyes as she felt Lily's warmth against her skin, the flutter of her daughter's rapid heartbeat gradually slowing to match her own. She knows you're her mama, Jasmine said softly. These moments matter more than all our medical interventions combined. Elena nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. These quiet moments of connection helped quiet the panic that threatened to overwhelm her when she thought about the future. She still hadn't given Alexander Winters an answer about his proposal. His business card sat in her wallet, its embossed lettering and heavy stock paper a stark contrast to the worn leather that contained exactly $37 after she'd spent $200 on a second-hand breast pump. Ms. Santiago, a different voice broke through her thoughts. Elena looked up to see Dr. Chen entering the NICU, clipboard in hand. How are you feeling today? Much better, Elena replied, her free hand gently patting Lily's back. Still sore, but the pain medication helps. Dr. Chen nodded, checking the twins' charts. Both of them are exceeding expectations. If they continue this trajectory, we might be looking at discharge in 2 weeks rather than the month we initially anticipated. 2 weeks! The time frame hit Elena like a physical blow. 2 weeks to figure out how to transform her tiny studio apartment into a suitable home for premature twins. 2 weeks to somehow acquire all the baby supplies she couldn't afford. 2 weeks to decide whether to accept Alexander Winters' proposition. That's wonderful news, Elena managed, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Chen seemed to read her thoughts. Have you given any more consideration to Mr. Winters' offer? I don't mean to pry, but as your doctor, I'm concerned about your support system once the twins are discharged. Elena sighed. I keep thinking there must be some catch. People like Alexander Winters don't just help strangers without expecting something in return. Perhaps, Dr. Chen acknowledged, but sometimes life presents us with unexpected opportunities. From a medical perspective, having financial stability would significantly benefit both you and your children during this critical period. Before Elena could respond, her phone vibrated with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see Rita from the diner, who had indeed fired her after she failed to show up for 3 consecutive shifts. Instead, the screen displayed a number she didn't recognize. "Do you need to take that, Doctor?" Chen asked. Elena shook her head. "It's probably just the landlord again. I'm already behind on rent, and he's not very understanding about the whole premature twin situation." Dr. Chen frowned, but said nothing more on the subject. "I'll check back this evening. Lily looks very content right now." After the doctor left, Elena's phone vibrated again, this time with a text message from the same unknown number. "Miss Santiago, this is Alexander Winters. I'm downstairs in the hospital lobby. I've brought some items for the twins that might be useful. Would it be convenient for me to visit briefly?" Eleanor read the message twice, surprised by both his thoughtfulness and his formality. After a moment's hesitation, she typed back, "The twins and I are in the NICU. You can come up if you'd like." 20 minutes later, after Lily had been carefully returned to her incubator and Matteo had enjoyed his own kangaroo care session, Elena looked up to see Alexander entering the NICU. He had traded his formal business suit for dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but somehow looked less intimidating than he had during their first meeting. "Mr. Winters," she greeted him, adjusting her hospital gown. "Ms. Santiago," he replied with a slight nod. "How are Matteo and Lily doing today?" Elena raised an eyebrow, surprised he remembered their names. "They're improving faster than expected. Matteo is already off oxygen support." A hint of a smile crossed Alexander's face as he approached the incubators, peering down at the twins with an expression Elena couldn't quite decipher. "They're fighters, like their mother." The echo of the nurse's earlier words wasn't lost on Elena. "You mentioned bringing something for them?" Alexander nodded, turning toward the door where a hospital volunteer waited with 2 large bags. He gestured for the volunteer to bring them in. "I took the liberty of consulting with a neonatal specialist about items that might be helpful for premature twins." Elena watched in astonishment as Alexander unpacked the bags. There were special preemie-sized clothes designed for babies with monitoring wires, incredibly soft blankets, a professional-grade breast pump far superior to the second-hand one she'd purchased, nursing supplies, and 2 small stuffed bears, one with a blue ribbon, one with a pink. "This is..." Elena trailed off, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gifts. These weren't random expensive items selected to impress. They were carefully chosen practical necessities that showed genuine consideration for the twins' needs. "I hope I haven't overstepped," Alexander said, his typical confidence wavering slightly. "The specialist mentioned these particular items make the NICU stay and transition home easier." Elena touched one of the specially designed preemie sleepers, noting how the snap closures would accommodate all the monitoring equipment currently attached to her babies. "Thank you. This is incredibly thoughtful." Alexander seemed relieved by a response. He stood somewhat awkwardly by the incubators, his eyes drawn repeatedly to the twins. When Matteo's tiny hand escaped from his swaddling, Alexander's expression changed, a flash of raw emotion quickly controlled. "Have you considered my proposal?" he asked, his business tone returning. Elena straightened in her chair, gathering her courage. "I have questions first. Why nursing? Your company must employ hundreds of people with medical backgrounds. Why invest in me specifically?" "Efficiency," Alexander replied without hesitation. "You have nearly completed your nursing degree, have personal experience with premature infants, and clearly possess determination. My company values those qualities." "And the financial support? The medical bills alone must be astronomical. Winters Enterprises generates billions in annual revenue. This investment is negligible from a financial perspective, but potentially valuable from a human resources standpoint. Elena studied his face, searching for deception, but finding only carefully maintained neutrality. What exactly would my role involve at your company? Initially, consulting on user experience for our neonatal equipment, providing feedback from both a parent's and healthcare provider's perspective. After completing your degree, you would join our product development team, helping design equipment that better serves patients and medical staff. His answers were logical, practical, and still didn't explain why a billionaire CEO was personally involving himself in the situation of a random woman who had texted him by mistake. Elena decided to be direct. Mr. Winters, with all due respect, most CEOs would have delegated this kind of project to their HR department. Why are you handling this personally? Alexander's carefully maintained facade faltered. He glanced at the twins, then back at Elena. May I sit? Elena gestured to the chair beside her, watching as Alexander Winters, a man whose face had graced the cover of Fortune magazine, sat in a plastic hospital chair and seemed to search for words. Before she died, he began quietly. My wife, Rebecca, was a neonatal nurse. She was passionate about improving care for premature infants. After her death, I established a division within Winters Enterprises focused on developing better medical technology for neonatal care. It was meant to honor her memory. He paused, looking at the twins. When I received your text on the anniversary of losing Rebecca and our daughter, it felt significant. Perhaps it's irrational, but I couldn't ignore it. The sincerity in his voice surprised Elena. This wasn't the calculated business proposition she had suspected. I'm sorry about your wife and daughter, truly. Alexander nodded once, his composure returning. The offer remains business-focused, regardless of the personal connection. You would be an asset to the company, and we would provide the stability. You and your children need a mutually beneficial arrangement. Elena considered his words carefully. The practical part of her mind, the part that had gotten her through nursing school while working 2 jobs, recognized this opportunity for what it was, a lifeline. Her twins deserved better than a life of constant financial struggle, and this could provide them with security she couldn't offer on her own. If I accept, she said slowly, I want everything in writing, the exact terms, expectations, and duration of the commitment. Alexander straightened, shifting back into business mode. Of course, I'll have my legal team draft a contract for your review. And I want to be clear, this is a professional arrangement. I won't be indebted to you personally. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed Alexander's face. Understood, Ms. Santiago, strictly business. Elena nodded, feeling both relief and apprehension as she made her decision. Then I accept your offer, pending review of the contract terms. Alexander extended his hand, and Elena shook it, noting the contrast between his perfectly manicured appearance and her hospital bracelet-adorned wrist. The moment was interrupted by a small cry from Lily's incubator. Both adults turned immediately toward the sound. May I? Alexander asked, gesturing toward the incubator. Elena hesitated, then nodded. She watched as Alexander approached Lily, his typically confident demeanor replaced by careful, almost reverent movements. He didn't touch the baby, merely stood looking down at her with an expression that seemed to contain years of unspoken grief. She looks like a fighter, he said softly. They both are, Elena replied, moving to stand beside him. As they stood together watching the twins, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this bizarre twist of fate, a misdirected text message, had altered the course of all their lives in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the doorway of what used to be her cramped studio apartment, barely recognizing the transformed space. The peeling paint and water-stained ceiling had been repaired, the ancient appliances replaced, and the entire unit reconfigured to accommodate the twins' needs. Where her fold-out sofa bed once stood, there were now two beautiful white cribs with breathable mesh sides, specially designed for premature infants who needed monitoring. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" asked Julia Carter, the home transition specialist Alexander had assigned to help Elena prepare for the twins' homecoming. The woman had coordinated everything from the apartment renovations to the delivery of essential baby equipment, all with quiet efficiency. "It's incredible," Elena admitted, still adjusting to the reality of her new circumstances. "I never imagined they would come home to a place like this." Julia smiled professionally. Mr. Winters was very specific about ensuring the environment would meet all medical recommendations for premature twins. The air purification system is hospital grade, and the nursing station we've set up has everything the NICU nurses suggested for home care. Elena ran her hand over the changing table, stocked with premature-sized diapers and specialized supplies. Everything was perfect. Almost too perfect. The contract she had signed with Alexander Winters had been surprisingly straightforward. Full coverage of medical expenses, housing support, childcare assistance, and educational costs while she completed her nursing degree. In return, she would provide consultation during her recovery period and commit to 2 years of employment with Winters Medical Technologies after graduation. What the contract didn't explain was why Alexander himself continued to visit the twins regularly, always bringing some thoughtful item, a book on infant development, special swaddling blankets recommended by neonatal experts, or articles about groundbreaking premature infant care techniques. His visits were brief and professional, yet Elena sensed something beneath his controlled exterior that he kept carefully guarded. "The twins will be discharged tomorrow, correct?" Julia asked, checking her tablet. Elena nodded, both excited and terrified by the prospect. "Yes, Dr. Chen gave final approval this morning. Both of them have reached the weight requirements and are feeding well." "Excellent. I've arranged for a specialized medical transport service to bring them home. Mr. Winters thought you might prefer that to public transportation." Elena bit back a comment about how she would have managed without a billionaire's intervention. The truth was she was grateful. Navigating public buses with premature twins and all their medical equipment would have been a nightmare. "Please thank Mr. Winters for his thoroughness," Elena said instead. "And thank you, Julia, for coordinating everything." After Julia left, Elena sat in the comfortable new rocking chair by the window, overwhelmed by the contrast between her circumstances today and 3 weeks ago. The thought that kept returning was simple but persistent. Why was Alexander Winters doing all this? The business arrangement made sense on paper, but his personal involvement remained puzzling. Her phone chimed with a message. She expected it to be from the NICU nurses. They had been sending her regular updates throughout the day, but instead saw Alexander's name on the screen. "I hope the apartment preparations meet your expectations. I'll stop by the hospital tomorrow to see the twins before discharge, if that's convenient." Elena typed back, "The apartment is perfect, thank you. We'll be at the hospital until around 2 p.m. tomorrow." His response came quickly. "I'll come at noon. There's something I'd like to discuss before you take them home." Elena frowned at the message, wondering what new development could be coming. Despite her initial suspicions, Alexander had been true to his word so far, never adding conditions or changing the terms they had agreed upon. Still, tomorrow's conversation made her nervous. The next day, Elena arrived at the NICU early, eager to complete the discharge process. Matteo and Lily had transformed from the fragile, wire-covered infants of 3 weeks ago into alert, stronger babies who still required special care but were ready to leave the hospital environment. At 5 pounds each, they remained smaller than full-term newborns but had developed healthy routines of feeding and sleeping. "You're going to miss us," teased Nurse Jasmine as she helped Elena practice the proper way to disconnect and reconnect the twins' heart monitors. They would still need at home. I'll probably call you in a panic at 3 a.m., Elena admitted, carefully swaddling Lily while Matteo slept nearby. That's what we're here for, Jasmine assured her. But you've got this, Elena. You're already more knowledgeable than most parents of preemies. That nursing training is showing. Elena smiled gratefully. The nurses had become like family during their NICU stay, teaching her not just medical techniques, but offering emotional support during her darkest moments of fear and doubt. At precisely noon, Alexander arrived. Elena noticed immediately that something was different. He seemed less composed than usual, a faint tension visible around his eyes. He greeted the nurses by name, having become a familiar presence during his regular visits, then turned to Elena. Could we speak privately before the discharge? He asked. Elena nodded, suddenly apprehensive. We can use the parent consultation room. The twins are sleeping. In the small, private room, designed for discussions with doctors, Alexander seemed too large, too out of place in his perfectly tailored clothing. He remained standing, his usual confident posture replaced by an unusual restlessness. What did you want to discuss? Elena prompted when he didn't immediately speak. Alexander seemed to gather himself. I've been thinking about the arrangement we've made, and I believe it requires an adjustment. Elena's heart sank. Here it was, the catch she had been waiting for. What kind of adjustment? I'd like to be more involved with the twins' lives, beyond the professional relationship we've established. Elena stared at him, trying to understand. What exactly are you proposing? Alexander met her gaze directly. I've spoken with my board of directors and restructured my work schedule. I'll be personally overseeing the development of our new neonatal care line, which means I'll be working primarily from our local office rather than headquarters. I don't understand what this has to do with Matteo and Lily, Elena said carefully. I'd like to establish a more formal support role in their lives, he continued, his voice controlled, but with an underlying emotion Elena couldn't quite identify. Not to overstep boundaries, but to provide additional stability. Elena felt defensive instincts rising. They're my children, Mr. Winters. The contract doesn't give you any personal claim to them. That's not what I'm suggesting, he replied quickly. I'm offering additional support, my personal involvement, not just financial assistance. I've grown attached to them during these weeks. The admission seemed difficult for him, as though expressing such sentiment was unfamiliar territory. Elena studied his face, seeing beyond the powerful CEO to the man who had lost his wife and child in this very hospital 5 years earlier. Why? She asked simply. Why us? Is it because we remind you of what you lost? Alexander didn't flinch from the direct question. Perhaps initially, but now it's about them, Matteo and Lily, their potential, their future. And yes, about you as well, Elena. Your determination reminds me of Rebecca. The mention of his late wife's name softened Elena's defensiveness slightly. I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not looking for a replacement father for my children. I'm not asking to replace anyone, Alexander clarified. I'm asking for the opportunity to be present, to help in more than just financial ways, to watch them grow. Elena studied Alexander's face, searching for hidden motives, but finding only genuine emotion poorly concealed behind his usual composure. She thought of the coming months, the sleepless nights, the medical appointments, the constant vigilance premature twins would require, and knew that pride alone was a poor reason to deny her children additional support. I need to be clear about boundaries, she finally said. I'm grateful for everything, but I won't have my parenting decisions questioned or controlled. Alexander nodded, visible relief crossing his features. I understand. You're their mother. I'm simply offering additional support, practical and personal. What exactly would that look like? Elena asked, needing concrete details rather than vague promises. Regular visits, help with medical appointments, perhaps one evening a week where I could give you a break. He spoke carefully, as if he had rehearsed these points. I have resources that could make your life easier while you complete your degree, beyond just financial assistance. Before Elena could respond, the door opened and Nurse Jasmine poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Mateo is awake and hungry, and Dr. Chen wants to do one final check before discharge. Elena rose immediately. We'll continue this conversation later, she told Alexander. Right now, my babies need me. He nodded, following her back to the NICU where Mateo was indeed awake, his tiny face scrunched up with displeasure at being kept waiting. Elena lifted him carefully, still marveling at how perfectly he fit against her shoulder despite his small size. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Would you like to hold Lily while I feed him? She asked Alexander, surprising herself with the offer. Alexander's composed expression faltered. I haven't actually held either of them yet. It's about time you learned then. Elena nodded to Jasmine, who smiled and helped Alexander with the proper technique for lifting the tiny girl from her bassinet. Elena watched as the powerful CEO who commanded a corporate empire held Lily with trembling hands, his expression transforming into one of wonder as the baby girl curled her tiny fingers around his thumb. Something shifted in that moment. A silent acknowledgement that whatever arrangement developed between them would be shaped by these two small lives rather than by contracts or business propositions. The discharge process took another 2 hours, filled with final instructions, medication schedules, and the careful installation of the twins into their specialized car seats. Alexander remained present throughout, absorbing information with the same intensity he might apply to a billion-dollar acquisition. The medical transport is waiting whenever you're ready, he said as the final paperwork was completed. I've taken the liberty of having my personal physician on standby at your apartment for the first night in case any issues arise during the transition. Elena might have bristled at this presumption 3 weeks ago, but now she recognized it for what it was, not control, but care. Thank you, she said simply. The journey from hospital to home passed in a blur of anxiety and excitement. The medical transport team was professional and reassuring, helping transfer the twins and their equipment into the apartment with practiced efficiency. Alexander's physician, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Rivera, who specialized in premature infant care, did a quick assessment of both babies once they were settled. They're doing beautifully, Dr. Rivera assured Elena. I'll check in tomorrow morning, but call any time if you have concerns. Alexander has arranged for me to be available 24/7 for the next 2 weeks. After the medical team departed, Elena found herself alone with the twins and Alexander in the transformed apartment. The silence was broken only by the soft beeping of monitors and Lily's occasional coos. I should go and let you settle in, Alexander said. Standing awkwardly by the door, Elena surprised herself again by saying, You could stay for dinner, nothing fancy, just delivery. I should practice managing feedings while they're calm. Alexander's expression brightened momentarily before he controlled it. I'd like that. They ordered Thai food, and Elena demonstrated the careful supplemental feeding system the NICU had established for the twins, a combination of breastfeeding and specially formulated preemie nutrition. Alexander watched attentively, asking intelligent questions and offering to take notes on the feeding schedule. You're good at this, Elena observed, as he successfully helped burp Mateo after a feeding, the tiny boy looking even smaller against Alexander's broad shoulder. I've been reading books on premature infant care, he admitted, and watching the nurses every time I visited. The casual confession revealed more than perhaps he intended. The image of a powerful CEO studying baby care techniques with the same dedication he might apply to market analysis was both amusing and touching. As they ate their dinner in shifts while the twins dozed, Elena found herself asking the question that had lingered for weeks. What happens when the 2 years are up? After I've fulfilled my contract with your company, Alexander set down his fork, considering her question. Professionally, you'd be free to continue with Winter's medical technologies or pursue other opportunities. My support for the twins wouldn't change either way. And what if I wanted to move elsewhere? Take a position at a hospital in another city? A shadow crossed his face, but he answered honestly, I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't prevent it. I hope by then we'd have established a relationship where we could discuss such decisions openly. Elena nodded, appreciating his directness. I don't want the twins to become attached to someone who might disappear from their lives. I won't disappear, Alexander said with quiet conviction. Whatever happens between us professionally, my commitment to Matteo and Lily isn't temporary. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully address. Elena was saved from responding by Lily's sudden cry, a hungry wail that demanded immediate attention. I'll get her, Alexander offered, already, rising from his chair. You finish eating while you can. Elena watched as he carefully lifted Lily, murmuring soothing words as he brought her to the changing table. His movements were still cautious, but increasingly confident, evidence of his determination to learn what these babies needed. Later, after Alexander had left and both twins were sleeping in their new cribs, Elena sat in the rocking chair between them, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. Her mind replayed the bizarre sequence of events that had led to this moment. A wrong number, a mistaken text sent to one of the wealthiest men in the country, and now this strange new reality where a grieving CEO had somehow become entangled in their lives. She didn't know what the future held, but as she looked around the peaceful nursery with its state-of-the-art monitoring equipment and carefully selected comforts, she acknowledged that sometimes help came from the most unexpected sources. Whatever Alexander's motivations, guilt, grief, or genuine connection, his presence had undeniably changed their path for the better. Elena gently touched each baby's hand before finally allowing herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight they were home, they were safe, and they were not alone. 6 months passed in a blur of pediatrician appointments, growth milestones, and gradually establishing routines. The twins thrived under Elena's dedicated care, overcoming their premature start to become robust, alert babies with distinct personalities. Matteo was serious and observant, studying everything with intense focus, while Lily was expressive and determined, reaching for toys and mastering skills with stubborn persistence. Elena had returned to her nursing program, attending classes 3 days a week, while carefully balancing clinical rotations with the twins' needs. The childcare center at Winter's Medical Technologies, a recent addition to the company benefits that Alexander had implemented shortly after the twins' birth, provided specialized care from professionals trained in supporting premature infants. Alexander had kept his word about being present without overstepping. He visited regularly, usually twice a week, bringing developmental toys recommended by specialists and spending time with the twins. His initially awkward interactions had evolved into confident caregiving. He could now change diapers one-handed and recognize the different cries signaling hunger versus discomfort. They're hitting all their adjusted age milestones now, Elena remarked one evening, as Alexander helped her sort through the twins' outgrown clothes. They had fallen into a comfortable routine where he would stop by after work on Wednesdays, allowing Elena to study while he spent time with Matteo and Lily. Dr. Rivera mentioned that at their last checkup, Alexander replied, carefully folding a tiny sweater Lily had outgrown. She says their lung development is excellent considering their premature birth. Elena nodded, watching him with the clothes. The sight of a billionaire CEO meticulously folding baby garments still struck her as surreal, but it had become their normal. "I'm presenting my first product feedback report to your development team tomorrow," she said, changing the subject. "I'm a bit nervous." Alexander looked up, his expression softening. "The team values your perspective, Elena. The combination of your nursing knowledge and first-hand experience with premature twins provides insights our engineers need." "It still feels strange sometimes," she admitted. 6 months ago, I was a pregnant waitress who couldn't pay her rent. Now I'm consulting on multi-million-dollar medical equipment while finishing my nursing degree. "Life changes quickly," Alexander said, a distant look briefly crossing his face. Elena knew he was thinking about his own sudden life change 5 years earlier. From expectant father to widower in a single tragic day, the moment was interrupted by Matteo's cry from the nursery. Both adults rose automatically, but Elena gestured for Alexander to continue with the folding. "I'll check on him." In the nursery, Elena found Matteo awake and fussing, his little face red with displeasure. She lifted him gently, checking his diaper and finding it dry. "Hungry already, little man? You just ate an hour ago." "Growth spurt, perhaps," Alexander suggested from the doorway. Dr. Rivera mentioned they might have several in quick succession as they catch up to their chronological age. Elena nodded, settling into the rocking chair to nurse Matteo. After initial challenges, breastfeeding had become easier, though she still supplemented with the special formula designed for premature infants' nutritional needs. Alexander turned to leave, giving her privacy, but Elena stopped him. "You don't have to go. We're past the awkward stage by now, don't you think?" He hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat on the ottoman nearby. "The development team is excited about your input tomorrow. The prototype monitoring system you helped redesign is testing very well with focus groups." Elena smiled, adjusting Matteo as he nursed. "The original alarm was too jarring. Parents of preemies are already anxious enough without heart-stopping alerts for minor fluctuations. Exactly the kind of insight our engineers missed," Alexander agreed. "They understand the technical requirements, but not the emotional experience of using the equipment." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds being Matteo's soft nursing noises and Lily's occasional coos from her crib. Elena studied Alexander's face in the soft nursery lighting. The harsh lines of stress that had marked his features when they first met had softened over months of regular interaction with the twins. "You never talk about her," Elena said quietly. "Rebecca, you've told me about your company, your childhood, even your favorite books, but never about her." Alexander's expression stilled, his hands clasping together tightly. For a moment, Elena thought she had crossed an unspoken boundary, but then he exhaled slowly. "She loved autumn," he said, his voice low. "Every year she would insist on driving to Vermont to see the foliage. She collected leaves and pressed them in books." He paused, a faint smile touching his lips. "She was brilliant. Graduated top of her nursing class at Johns Hopkins. Could have worked anywhere, but chose neonatal care because she said those first days matter most." Elena remained silent, giving him space to continue if he wished. After a moment, he did. "She would have liked you," he said simply. "Your determination, your way with the twins." The statement hung in the air between them, filled with meaning neither was quite ready to address. Elena focused on Matteo, who had finished nursing and was now drowsily blinking. "Would you like to burp him?" she offered, a peace gesture acknowledging the emotional territory they'd entered. Alexander nodded, carefully taking the baby and positioning him against his shoulder with practiced ease. As he gently patted Matteo's back, his phone chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and frowned. "Problem?" Elena asked. "Nothing urgent. Just the Tokyo office with questions about the quarterly forecast." He continued patting Matteo, making no move to check the message further. Elena observed this small but significant choice. The CEO, who once would have interrupted anything for business, now prioritizing a baby's comfort over international corporate concerns. Whatever his initial motivations for entering their lives, Alexander's connection to the twins had become genuine and deep. The first anniversary of the twins' birth approached with a flurry of preparations. Elena had completed her nursing degree 2 months earlier, graduating with honors despite the challenges of raising premature twins while studying. She now worked part-time in the product development division of Winter's Medical Technologies, her insights helping shape a revolutionary new monitoring system for premature infants that was garnering attention throughout the medical community. "The Pediatric Medical Conference wants you to present alongside the engineering team," Alexander mentioned, as he helped set up decorations for the twins' birthday celebration. They were in Elena's apartment, still the same one Alexander had, renovated, though she could now afford something larger on her salary. She had chosen to stay, appreciating the familiar environment for the twins and its proximity to both work and the specialized daycare. "Me?" Elena paused in hanging streamers. "Why would they want a junior team member presenting?" Alexander gave her a look that had become familiar over the past year, a mixture of exasperation and admiration. "Because you're the bridge between the technical design and practical application. The medical community respects that dual perspective." Elena considered this as she taped another streamer to the wall. Matteo and Lily were napping in their room, which had been expanded once they outgrew their initial cribs. The twins were still smaller than average one-year-olds, but had surpassed all developmental milestones for their adjusted age, a testament to both excellent medical care and devoted parenting. "I'll think about it," she finally said. "Speaking of the conference, will you be here for the actual birthday? It's the same week." Alexander nodded without hesitation. "I've already cleared my schedule. The Tokyo acquisition can proceed without me physically present." Elena smiled, remembering a time when she'd assumed business would always take precedence in his life. Over the past year, she had watched Alexander transform from the cold, driven CEO she first encountered to a man who regularly rearranged global business meetings to attend pediatrician appointments. His relationship with the twins had deepened into genuine love. They lit up when he entered a room, reaching for him with complete trust. Their own relationship had evolved too, from wary business arrangement to a friendship neither had anticipated. They still maintained certain boundaries. Alexander never stayed overnight, and they carefully avoided discussing the future beyond Elena's 2-year contract commitment. But their interactions had developed an easy familiarity that sometimes surprised them both. "Julia sent these over for the party," Alexander said, retrieving a box from near the door. Inside were custom-made cake toppers, miniature replicas of Matteo and Lily created from photos, each perfectly capturing their distinct expressions. "They're perfect," Elena marveled, touching the tiny figures gently. "Though I still think a first birthday party this elaborate is excessive. They won't remember it." "The pictures will be worth it," Alexander countered with the hint of a smile. "Besides, celebrating their first year feels important. They've overcome so much." Elena couldn't argue with that. From their precarious beginning as premature twins born to a single mother without resources to thriving one-year-olds with every advantage, their journey had been remarkable. And if she was honest with herself, the celebration wasn't just for the twins. It marked a year since her life had changed through a misdirected text message. "I have something for you," Alexander said, interrupting her thoughts. He retrieved an envelope from his jacket pocket. "It's not a birthday gift for the twins. It's for you." Elena accepted the envelope cautiously. Their gift exchanges had always been practical, usually items for the twins or occasionally books they had discussed. This felt different. Inside, she found a deed, legal paperwork transferring ownership of her apartment to her name. Elena stared at the document in shock, then looked up at Alexander with a frown forming. "I can't accept this," she said firmly. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," Alexander clarified quickly. "It's recognition of your contributions to the company. The monitoring system you helped design is projected to generate millions in revenue and, more importantly, improve outcomes for thousands of premature infants. The board approved a substantial bonus, and I suggested this form rather than a direct payment." Elena studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or charity, but found only sincerity. Still, ownership of a Manhattan apartment worth at least $500,000 went far beyond reasonable compensation. "Alexander, I appreciate the thought, but if you truly object," he interrupted gently, "reject it on proper grounds. Not pride, not concern about appearances, but genuine objection to owning your home. Otherwise, accept that you've earned this through your own merit and work." His directness was disarming, as it often was. Elena looked down at the deed again, considering his words. She had contributed significantly to the new monitoring system, spending countless hours testing prototypes and suggesting critical improvements. The product was already being hailed as revolutionary in neonatal care. "Thank you," she finally said, meeting his gaze. "But this doesn't change anything about our arrangement." Alexander's expression flickered briefly with an emotion Elena couldn't quite identify. "Of course not. Speaking of which, we're approaching the halfway point of your 2-year commitment. Have you given any thought to your plans afterward?" The question seemed casual, but Elena sensed the weight behind it. She had been avoiding this topic, uncertain of her own feelings. The professional opportunity at Winter's Medical Technologies was exceptional. She was making a difference in neonatal care far beyond what she could achieve as a staff nurse. But the personal entanglement with Alexander remained complicated and undefined. "I haven't decided," she answered honestly. "The work is fulfilling, but—" She trailed off as sounds of stirring came through the baby monitor. Lily was awake, her familiar babbling growing more insistent. "I'll get her," Alexander offered, already moving toward the nursery with the ease of someone who had done this countless times before. Elena watched him go, the deed still in her hand. Their arrangement had begun as strictly transactional, his financial support in exchange for her expertise and commitment. But somewhere along the way, boundaries had blurred. Alexander wasn't just her employer or the twins' benefactor anymore. He had become something else entirely, a co-parent in all but name, a friend, and perhaps something more that neither of them had been ready to acknowledge. From the nursery came the sound of Lily's delighted giggles as Alexander lifted her from the crib, his voice warm as he greeted her. Moments later, Matteo joined in with his more subdued but equally happy sounds. Elena smiled, despite her conflicted thoughts. Whatever complications existed in their unusual relationship, the twins' happiness was undeniable proof that some part of this arrangement had been absolutely right. The Pediatric Medical Conference in Boston marked a turning point that neither Elena nor Alexander anticipated. Elena's presentation on the new monitoring system had drawn unexpected attention, with several leading hospitals expressing immediate interest in pilot programs. Her unique perspective as both a nurse and the mother of premature twins lent authenticity to her technical explanations, and her confidence in addressing questions from experienced medical professionals impressed everyone. including Alexander. Dr. Jameson from Mayo Clinic wants to discuss potential modifications for their NICU, Alexander mentioned as they walked through the Boston Common, pushing the twins in their double stroller. They had extended the business trip into a short vacation, giving Matteo and Lily their first experience of a different city. At 15 months, the twins were curious about everything, pointing and babbling at ducks in the pond and reaching for colorful autumn leaves. I told him our development team would be in touch next week, Elena replied, adjusting Lily's hat against the October breeze. His suggestions about the alarm thresholds were insightful. Alexander nodded, his attention divided between the business discussion and Matteo's attempts to escape his stroller straps. He also asked if you would consider consulting directly with their neonatal department about the implementation. Elena stopped walking, turning to face Alexander with surprise. Me consulting for Mayo Clinic? You shouldn't be surprised, Alexander said, his expression serious. Your knowledge is valuable, Elena. Other institutions recognize that, even if you sometimes don't. She resumed walking, processing this unexpected development. That would require travel to Minnesota. The twins would be well cared for, Alexander finished, whether by me, the daycare, or both. You shouldn't limit your professional growth because of logistics we can solve. The we didn't escape Elena's notice. Over the past 15 months, they had indeed become a we in many practical aspects of child rearing, though they had carefully avoided defining their personal relationship. Alexander was present for doctor's appointments, midnight fevers, and first steps. He had a key to her apartment and his own designated drawer containing spare clothes for when baby food or finger paints inevitably found their way onto his custom. Suits, I'll consider it, Elena said, watching as Alexander crouched down to retrieve a toy Matteo had dropped, his movements natural and paternal. This man bore little resemblance to the cold CEO who had appeared in her hospital room after receiving a misdirected text. The transformation wasn't just in how he interacted with the twins, but in subtle personal changes. He smiled more readily, worked slightly fewer hours, and had developed a surprising patience for the chaos that accompanied toddlers. That evening, after settling the twins in their travel cribs in the hotel suite Alexander had arranged, Elena found him on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. She joined him, wrapping a cardigan around herself against the autumn chill. They're finally asleep, she said, accepting the cup of tea he offered. Matteo fought it until the last minute, as usual. Alexander smiled, his affection for the boys. Stubborn nature evident. He's determined, like his mother. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Elena gathered her courage to address what had been on her mind since the conference. 5 companies approached me with job offers today, she said quietly, including positions at 2 leading children's hospitals. Alexander's hands tightened slightly around his cup, but his expression remained carefully neutral. That doesn't surprise me. Your presentation was exceptional. My contract with Winters Medical Technologies has 8 more months, Elena continued. I wanted to be transparent about the offers. Alexander turned to face her fully. Are you considering them? The question was direct, his tone controlled, but with an undercurrent of tension that revealed more than perhaps he intended. Elena met his gaze steadily. That depends on several factors, she replied. Professional growth, opportunities for impact, the twins' stability. She paused before adding, and us, Alexander, whatever this is between us. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. For 15 months they had operated in a carefully maintained middle ground, more than business associates, but less than a defined couple. Alexander's devotion to the twins was unquestionable, but his feelings for Elena remained largely unexpressed beyond mutual respect and friendship. What do you want it to be? He finally asked, his usual confidence wavering. Elena looked out at the city lights, gathering her thoughts. When I accidentally texted you, I was desperate and alone. I would have done anything to provide for my babies, including signing a contract with a stranger. But now, she turned back to him, now I need clarity. Are we co-parents, friends, something else? Because those job offers would mean moving, and that decision affects more than just my career. Alexander set down his cup, his composure finally breaking. I don't want you to leave, he admitted, the words coming out roughly. Not just because of the twins, though the thought of not seeing them daily is... He shook his head, unable to complete the thought. But also because of you, Elena. These months with you have been... I never expected to feel this way again. After Rebecca, the mention of his late wife, still rare despite their growing closeness, underscored the significance of his words. Elena felt her heart race as Alexander took a step closer. I've been hesitant to define this because I feared pressuring you, he continued. Your contract, my position at the company, the power imbalance made it complicated. I wanted any choice you made to be completely your own. Elena understood then. His careful maintenance of boundaries hadn't been indifference, but consideration. Alexander Winters, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his corporate empire, had deliberately restrained himself to ensure her autonomy. So if I were to stay after my contract ends, she said carefully, it wouldn't be because of obligation, or the twins, or professional opportunity. It would be because I choose to. Alexander nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. And if I were to ask you to consider us as more than co-parents or colleagues, it would be completely separate from any professional arrangement. From the hotel room came a small cry, Lily awakening briefly before settling again. The sound was a reminder of how their lives had intertwined through these two small children, brought together by chance and circumstance. We should go inside, Elena said softly, but this conversation isn't finished. Alexander nodded, following her into the warmth of the suite where the twins slept peacefully, unaware of the pivotal moment unfolding between the adults who had become their family through the most unlikely of beginnings. A wrong number that somehow turned out to be exactly right. The second winter since the twins' birth brought record snowfall to Manhattan, transforming the city into a glittering wonderland that delighted Matteo and Lily. At 18 months old, they pressed their small hands against the apartment windows, mesmerized by the falling snowflakes and the transformed world outside. Elena watched them with a smile, capturing photos on her phone to send to Alexander, who was in Chicago finalizing details for the nationwide hospital rollout of their monitoring system. Snow! Lily declared with the certainty of a toddler who had recently discovered the power of words. Her vocabulary was expanding rapidly, outpacing her brother's more measured approach to language. That's right, sweetheart, Elena confirmed, brushing Lily's dark curls away from her forehead. Daddy will be home tonight to see it too. The word daddy had evolved naturally in their household. Alexander had become exactly that to the twins. Present for morning routines and bedtime stories, weekend outings and doctor appointments. The shift in his title had paralleled the gradual evolution in his relationship with Elena following their conversation in Boston 3 months earlier. They had moved forward carefully, both aware of the complex foundation their relationship was built upon. Alexander had insisted on formally removing himself from any direct supervision of Elena's work at Winters Medical Technologies, ensuring her professional advancement remained separate from their personal connection. Elena had appreciated this gesture, recognizing it as respect for her independence rather than distancing. Their first official date had been almost comically formal, given their existing intimacy as co-parents. Alexander had arranged a private dinner at an exclusive restaurant, both of them dressed as if meeting for the first time rather than after. 18 months of sharing pediatrician visits and middle-of-the-night fevers. "This feels strange," Elena had admitted halfway through the elaborate meal. "We already know each other's coffee preferences and which twin you check on first when you come over." Alexander's serious expression had softened into a rare, unguarded smile. "Matteo first, because he's the lighter sleeper. And you take your coffee with almond milk, no sugar, except when you're exhausted, and then you add cinnamon." The evening had ended with a tentative kiss at her door. A beginning, rather than a culmination, acknowledging that they were building something new alongside their established roles as the twins' parents. The sound of a key in the lock pulled. Elena, from her memories. The twins immediately abandoned the window, racing toward the door with excited squeals of, "Daddy! Daddy!" Alexander appeared, snowflakes melting on his dark coat. His overnight bag dropped unceremoniously as he crouched to receive the twins' enthusiastic embraces. Elena watched from across the room, struck by how different this Alexander was from the man she had first encountered in the hospital. The transformation went beyond his more relaxed clothing, or the smile that came easily now. It was in his entire bearing, the way tension had given way to purpose. "You're early," she said as he stood, a twin attached to each leg. "I thought your flight wasn't until this evening." "I took the morning flight instead," he replied, his eyes warming as they met hers. "The Chicago team can handle the final details." "Without me?" "Snow," Matteo informed him seriously, pointing toward the window. "I see that," Alexander confirmed with equal seriousness. "Perfect weather for the surprise I brought." Elena raised an eyebrow as he retrieved a bag she hadn't noticed initially. From it, he produced 2 tiny snowsuits and miniature boots. "Central Park is transformed," he explained, his enthusiasm barely contained. "I thought we could take them, sledding on the small hill by the pond. The company has a development meeting near there in 2 hours, but that gives us enough time for their first snow experience." The casual mention of adjusting business commitments around family activities had become commonplace, but Elena never took it for granted. Alexander's prioritization of the twins represented a fundamental shift in values for a man once defined solely by corporate achievement. Bundling the twins into their new snow gear created the expected chaos, with Lily insisting on putting her own boots on backward, and Matteo solemnly accepting help but requiring explanation for each step of the process. By the time they reached Central Park, the twins were vibrating with excitement, their eyes wide at the transformed landscape. Alexander had indeed brought a small sled, perfectly sized for toddlers. He positioned it at the top of a gentle slope, then sat with both twins on his lap. Elena captured the moment on her phone, the powerful CEO with arms protectively wrapped around 2 bundled toddlers, his expression one of pure joy as they prepared to slide down. "Ready?" he asked the twins, who responded with enthusiastic bouncing. Elena watched as the sled glided down the small hill, the twins' delighted squeals floating through the crisp air. Alexander's laughter joined theirs, uninhibited and genuine in a way that still surprised those who knew only his corporate persona. At the bottom, he looked up and caught Elena's gaze, his expression softening into something more intimate. Later, after the twins had experienced the wonder of snow angels and tasted their first snowflakes, Alexander reluctantly checked his watch. "I need to leave for that meeting soon," he said, as they brushed snow from the twins' suits. Elena nodded, helping Lily readjust her hat. "We'll head home for hot chocolate and a warm bath. These 2 will probably nap early after all this excitement." Alexander knelt to say goodbye to the twins, promising to return for dinner and bedtime stories. As he stood, he hesitated, then pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket. "I was going to wait until tonight," he said quietly, his voice suddenly uncertain, "but seeing you all here in the snow—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders in a gesture Elena recognized as his way of gathering courage. I had a whole speech prepared about timing and contracts and how business arrangements became something infinitely more valuable. Elena's heart began racing as she realized what was happening. The twins, momentarily distracted by a nearby dog, gave them a rare moment of adult conversation. "Alexander," she began, but he shook his head. "Let me finish, or I'll lose my nerve," he said, with a self-deprecating smile. "You texted a wrong number and changed everything, Elena. You and these incredible children showed me how to live again after I thought that part of me had died with Rebecca. I don't want to be just their father or your partner. I want us to be a family in every sense." He opened the box, revealing a stunning yet understated diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Eleanor looked from the ring to Alexander's face, seeing past the confident CEO to the vulnerable man beneath. In his eyes, she saw not the power or wealth that had initially defined him, but the love and commitment he had demonstrated day after day for nearly 2 years. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady despite the emotion building in her chest. "Yes, we'll be a family." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, Matteo and Lily returned, curious about this new development. Alexander lifted them both, one in each arm, as Elena showed them the sparkling ring. "Family," Matteo said solemnly, one of his carefully chosen words. "Yes," Alexander confirmed, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at Elena. "Our family." 3 years later, Elena stood in the doorway of the twins' bedroom, watching as Alexander helped them pack small backpacks for their first day of kindergarten. At 4.5, Matteo and Lily had grown from fragile premature infants into vibrant, healthy children with distinct personalities that continued to develop. Matteo remained thoughtful and analytical, carefully selecting books for his backpack with serious consideration, while Lily approached the task with enthusiastic energy, already explaining to her stuffed bear how she would show it to all her new friends. "Remember, Mr. Bear stays in your backpack during class time," Alexander reminded Lily gently, helping her tuck the beloved toy into a special pocket. "He can watch, but he needs to stay quiet during lessons." Lily nodded solemnly, though the mischievous glint in her eye, so like her mother's, suggested the rule might face creative interpretation. "He promises to whisper," she negotiated, a skill she had clearly inherited from watching Alexander in business discussions. Elena smiled, her hand automatically moving to her rounded belly where their third child, a boy according to the ultrasound, was making his presence known with enthusiastic kicks. At 7 months pregnant, Elena had scaled back her clinical consulting work but continued to lead the pediatric product division at Winter's Medical Technologies, a role that had expanded significantly since the success of their monitoring system. The past 3 years had brought changes none of them could have predicted. Their wedding had been intimate but joyful, with the twins toddling down the aisle, scattering flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Alexander had officially adopted Matteo and Lily shortly afterward, a legal formality that simply confirmed what had been true in their hearts for years. Professionally, Elena had become a respected voice in neonatal care innovation, regularly speaking at medical conferences and consulting with leading children's hospitals. Alexander had gradually restructured Winter's enterprises to allow for a more balanced life, delegating responsibilities that once would have consumed his nights and weekends. The company hadn't suffered for this shift, quite the opposite. The Medical Technologies division had expanded dramatically under Elena's guidance, bringing life-saving innovations to NICUs across the country. "Mummy, does my teacher know I was a preemie?" Lily asked, abandoning her packing to race over to Eleanor. "Can I tell her about the special machines you and Daddy make for tiny babies?" Eleanor crouched down as best she could with her pregnant belly. "Of course you can, sweetheart. That's an important part of your story." "Our story?" Matteo corrected seriously, joining his sister. He placed a small hand on Elena's stomach. And his story too, because you and Daddy will take care of him if he's early like we were. Alexander met Elena's gaze over the twins' heads, sharing a moment of silent understanding. They had been meticulous in monitoring this pregnancy, both acutely aware of the risks after Elena's previous premature delivery. So far, everything was progressing normally, but they had a comprehensive birth plan in place for any scenario. That's right, Alexander confirmed, joining his family and wrapping an arm around Elena's shoulders. But your brother seems quite comfortable where he is. For now. He's waiting until after our birthday, Lily declared with the confidence only a 4-year-old could muster. He doesn't want to steal our special day. Elena laughed. That would be very considerate of him. Now, are your backpacks ready? Grandpa will be here soon to take pictures before we leave for school. The mention of Grandpa referred to Elena's father, Robert Santiago, whose relationship with his daughter and grandchildren had been cautiously rebuilt over the past few years. After years of struggling with alcoholism following his wife's death, Robert had embraced sobriety when Elena reconnected with him shortly after the twins' first birthday. Now he was a regular presence in their lives, doting on his grandchildren and finding purpose in his role as the family photographer, documenting milestones large and small. As the twins raced to complete their preparations, Alexander pulled Elena closer, his hand joining hers on her rounded belly. "Nervous about today?" he asked quietly. "About kindergarten, or about the doctor's appointment afterward," Elena replied with a small smile. "Both, I suppose." Elena leaned into his embrace. "They're ready for school. They're confident, curious, and more than prepared academically, thanks to your reading sessions. As for the appointment," she paused, taking a deep breath, "I'm cautiously optimistic. Dr. Rivera hasn't found any concerns, and I'm already 7 weeks further along than I was with the twins." Alexander nodded, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Whatever happens, we're prepared. The NICU at Manhattan Memorial has our latest equipment, and I've already arranged for my schedule to be clear for the next 3 months around your due date." The doorbell rang, announcing Robert's arrival. The twins immediately abandoned their backpacks and raced toward the front door of their brownstone, eager to greet their grandfather and show off their school outfits. "Ready for the next chapter?" Alexander asked as they followed at a more measured pace. Elena smiled, thinking of how far they had come from that desperate day when she had mistakenly texted a stranger while in premature labor. "More than ready," she replied, "though I'm still amazed sometimes at how we got here." Alexander's expression softened as he watched the twins excitedly pulling their grandfather toward their room to see their backpacks. "A wrong number that turned out to be exactly right," he murmured, echoing words they had shared many times over the years. Elena squeezed his hand in agreement. From the clinical coldness of the NICU to the warm chaos of their family home, from a business arrangement to a marriage built on genuine love and respect, their journey had been unexpected in every way. As she watched Alexander kneel down to help Matteo straighten his collar for photos, Elena felt a profound gratitude for that moment of desperation that had led her to send a text message to the wrong number. A simple mistake that had changed everything. Robert captured the moment with his camera, Alexander with an arm around each twin, Elena with her hands resting on her pregnant belly, all of them smiling with the quiet confidence of a family who had overcome significant challenges together. It wasn't the life Elena had imagined when she lay alone in that hospital bed 4.5 years ago, terrified and uncertain. It was infinitely better. 10 years later, the Santiago Winters household buzzed with the controlled chaos that defined their Saturday mornings. 14-year-old twins, Matteo and Lily, occupied opposite ends of the spectrum in their approach to weekend activities. Matteo already dressed and reading quietly at the kitchen island, while Lily remained buried under blankets despite 3 wake-up calls. 9-year-old Noah, energetic and perpetually in motion, bounced between rooms organizing his soccer gear for the afternoon game. Elena moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, simultaneously reviewing patient files on her tablet and preparing breakfast. Her career had evolved over the past decade. After serving as director of neonatal product development at Winters Medical Technologies for several years, she had returned to her original passion for direct patient care. Now she divided her time between consulting work and serving as the head of neonatal nursing at Manhattan Memorial's NICU, the same unit where her twins had once been patients. "Mom, can you sign my permission slip for the Science Museum?" Matteo asked, sliding a form across the counter. "It's due Monday." Elena glanced at the document while flipping pancakes. "Of course. Is this for the new robotics exhibition? Dad mentioned he helped fund that through the foundation." Matteo nodded, his serious expression reminiscent of Alexander's during business discussions. "That's why I want to go. I've been working on some improvements to the wheelchair prototype in Dad's home lab, and I think seeing the exhibition might help with the mobility issue I've been stuck on." Elena signed the form, smiling at her son's familiar intensity. At 14, Matteo already showed remarkable engineering aptitude, spending hours in the small research lab Alexander had built in their brownstone's converted basement. His current project, a more maneuverable wheelchair for pediatric patients, had consumed his attention for months. "Noah, if you bounce that soccer ball inside one more time, it's staying home today," Alexander called out as he descended the stairs, intercepting the ball mid-bounce with reflexes that hadn't diminished despite his 50 years. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, he looked more like the devoted father he had become than the intimidating CEO he still was during business hours. "Sorry, Dad," Noah grinned, not appearing particularly repentant. "I was practicing my control for Coach Miguel." Alexander tucked the ball under his arm, ruffling his younger son's hair. "Practice outside after breakfast. Is your sister still asleep?" "Comatose," Matteo confirmed without looking up from his book. "I tried waking her 15 minutes ago and received a pillow to the face for my efforts." Elena checked the time and sighed. "She'll miss breakfast at this rate, and we need to leave for Noah's game by 11. "I'll get her up," Alexander volunteered, already heading back upstairs. His unique ability to rouse teenage Lily without triggering her formidable temper had become a valuable family skill. Elena served pancakes to the boys, her mind briefly wandering to the afternoon schedule. After Noah's soccer game, she had a teleconference with doctors in Singapore about implementing their newest premature infant feeding system, while Alexander was taking Matteo to meet with actual engineers at Winters Medical to review his wheelchair design. Lily had debate team practice, preparing for the national competition, where she was already making a name for herself with her persuasive arguments and quick thinking. Their lives were full, sometimes overwhelming in their complexity. But Elena never forgot how close they had come to a very different reality. The framed photo on their kitchen wall served as a daily reminder. Elena in a hospital bed holding newborn twins, Alexander standing awkwardly nearby, still essentially a stranger who had appeared because of a misdirected text message. "Remembering the beginning?" Alexander asked quietly, returning to the kitchen with a sleepy but dressed Lily trailing behind him. Elena nodded, passing a plate of pancakes to their daughter. 14 years ago today, actually. The day I accidentally texted the CEO of Winters Enterprises instead of my boss at the diner." Lily perked up at this familiar family story. "The text that changed everything," she said, reaching for the maple syrup. "Dad always says it was the most important wrong number in history." "What would have happened if Mom had texted the right number?" Noah asked around a mouthful of pancakes. Alexander and Elena exchanged glances, the question momentarily silencing them both. It was something they had discussed privately over the years, the precarious path that might have unfolded without Alexander's intervention, financial struggle, potential health complications for the premature twins, the overwhelming challenge of raising 2 infants alone while trying to finish a nursing degree and work multiple jobs. "I would have figured something out," Elena said finally, her voice confident despite the weight of the hypothetical scenario. "But it would have been much harder. And we would have missed out on the greatest gift of our lives," Alexander added, his hand finding Elena's on the counter. "Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one." Matteo, ever practical, closed his book. "Statistically improbable, but undeniably fortunate," he concluded. "Though technically, Mom, you didn't text the wrong number. You texted an unknown number. There's a distinction." Lily rolled her eyes at her twin's precision. "The point is that Mom reached out for help and found it from an unexpected source. It's practically a modern fairy tale." "A fairy tale with a lot of NICU time and board meetings," Elena laughed, checking her watch. "Speaking of which, we need to move if we're going to make it to Noah's game on time." As the family dispersed to gather their things, Alexander pulled Elena into a brief embrace in the momentary quiet of the kitchen. "Happy anniversary of the text that brought us together," he murmured against her hair. Elena smiled, thinking of the journey from that desperate hospital room to this full, chaotic life they had built together. From premature twins with uncertain futures to confident teenagers pursuing their passions, from a cold business arrangement to a marriage built on mutual respect and deep love. "Best wrong number ever," she agreed, stretching up to kiss him quickly before their youngest son bounded back into the kitchen, demanding to know who had moved his lucky shin guards. Later that afternoon, watching Noah race across the soccer field, with Alexander cheering enthusiastically beside her, Elena's phone chimed with a message. She glanced down to see a text from Lily, who was at her debate practice. "Coach says I'm first speaker at Nationals. Tell Dad his argument strategy worked." Elena smiled and showed the message to Alexander, who beamed with pride. Their children's accomplishments, big and small, never failed to move him. The CEO, who had once measured success solely in market share and profit margins, now finding his greatest joy in debate trophies and science fair projects. As she typed a congratulatory response to Lily, Elena couldn't help but appreciate the irony, how a desperate text message sent in error 14 years ago had led to a lifetime of messages shared in love, binding their family together across busy schedules and individual pursuits. Some mistakes, it seemed, were destined to be the beginning of something wonderful rather than the end. 20 years had passed since that fateful text message, and the Santiago Winters family gathered in the expansive backyard of their Connecticut home to celebrate the twins' graduation from medical school. At 34, Matteo and Lily had followed different paths within medicine. Matteo pursuing biomedical engineering with a focus on neonatal technology, while Lily had chosen neonatology, specializing in the care of premature infants. Elena, now in her mid-50s, with elegant silver streaks in her dark hair, arranged a display of photographs chronicling the twins' journey from tiny NICU babies to accomplished medical professionals. The centerpiece was the framed first family photo, Elena in a hospital bed holding newborn twins, with Alexander standing somewhat awkwardly nearby, still a stranger who had appeared because of a misdirected text. "Mom, is this really necessary?" Lily asked, examining the photo display with a mixture of embarrassment and affection. "Everyone's seen these a million times." "Indulge me," Elena replied, adjusting a recent photo of the twins in their white coats. "It's not every day both my children graduate from medical school simultaneously." Alexander, his dark hair now more salt than pepper but his presence still commanding, wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders. "Your mother has earned the right to embarrass you thoroughly today. We both have." 24-year-old Noah, home from his final year of law school, emerged from the house carrying a tray of champagne flutes. "The caterers say dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. Grandpa Robert is showing them his latest photographs and telling the story about how Dad showed up at the hospital when you two were born." Lily groaned good-naturedly. "He's going to tell everyone that story today, isn't he?" "It's his favorite," Matteo confirmed, joining them from where he'd been helping guests find parking. "He still gets emotional at the part where Dad paid all the medical bills." The gathering represented the full spectrum of their journey. Elena's, Father Robert, now in his 70s and 15 years sober, colleagues from Winter's Medical Technologies who had watched the twins grow up, doctors and nurses from Manhattan Memorial who had cared for Matteo and Lily in their first precarious weeks, and a generation of premature infants and their parents who had benefited from the medical innovations that had emerged from the Santiago-Winters partnership. The Neonatal Care Foundation they had established 10 years earlier had revolutionized access to advanced care for premature infants in underserved communities, combining Alexander's business acumen with Elena's medical expertise. What had begun as a private family mission had expanded into a global initiative, with Matteo's engineering innovations and Lily's clinical research pushing boundaries of what was possible for the tiniest patients. "I still can't believe you're both officially doctors now," Alexander said, his voice carrying the pride he never attempted to conceal when it came to his children. "Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised given how determined you both were from the beginning." Elena smiled at the familiar observation. "Fighting from their very first day," she agreed, "and now they'll be helping other fighters get their start." As family and friends began to gather for the celebration, Elena found herself momentarily transported back to that hospital room 20 years earlier. Frightened, alone, and desperate enough to text her boss, begging not to be fired. That misdirected message, landing on Alexander Winter's phone instead of Rita's from the Bluebird Diner, had altered the trajectory of all their lives. Noah appeared at her elbow, interrupting her reminiscence. "Mum, the photographer wants to know if you want a recreation of that first hospital photo, for symmetry or whatever." Elena laughed, looking over at Alexander deep in conversation with Matteo about his latest patent application. "I think we've come too far for that to make sense anymore," she said. "Better to capture where we are now instead of where we started." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "Dad was telling me last week that in business, the most valuable connections often come from unexpected places. I guess you two are living proof of that philosophy." "A wrong number that turned out to be exactly right," Elena agreed, using the phrase that had become family shorthand for their unlikely beginning. "Now, go rescue your grandfather from the caterers before he shows them all your baby pictures." 2. As twilight settled over the celebration, Elena found Alexander standing alone near the garden's edge, watching their family with quiet contentment. The fairy lights strung throughout the trees illuminated the scene, Matteo explaining his latest innovation to fascinated colleagues, Lily deep in conversation with her former NICU nurse, Noah charming everyone as usual, and Robert proudly showing photos to anyone who would look. 20 years, Alexander murmured as Elena joined him. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I walked into that hospital room after getting your text." Elena slipped her hand into his. "And sometimes it feels like we've always been this family." Alexander nodded, his eyes reflecting the lights and memories. "I was thinking about legacy today. Not the company or the foundation, but the real legacy. How a single moment of connection can change everything that follows. A wrong number that sparked a revolution in neonatal care," Elena said softly, "and gave 2 tiny premature twins. The chance to become doctors who will save other babies just like they once were. Alexander turned to face her fully. You know what Matteo told me earlier? He said their graduating class voted him and Lily most likely to change the world. I think they already have. Elena smiled, tears gathering in her eyes as she looked at the beautiful tapestry their lives had become, woven from threads of chance, choice, challenge, and love. What had begun as a desperate plea for help had transformed into a legacy that would continue saving lives for generations to come. As they rejoined the party, embraced by the warmth of family and purpose, their story stood as testament to life's unexpected turns, how the wrong number, wrong person, or wrong moment could sometimes be exactly right. If you believe that fate works in mysterious ways, that love can bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes our greatest mistakes lead to our greatest blessings, subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us how unexpected connections can change everything. Soul stories, where every wrong turn might just lead you home.